Hello everyone and welcome to the J72 Gaming Channel. My name is Jacob, but you can just call me Jay here. Everyone loves a tier list, right? I know I do. So today we're going to do just that in my first installment of what I'm calling Thursday tier lists, because on Thursdays we do tier lists.
On Wednesdays we wear pink.
If you guys are excited to see my opinions here on the dinosaurs and reptiles here in Path of Titans, please do me a favor and subscribe and like the video down below. If you like what you see here today, you might like some more stuff that I produce in the future, so subscribe. It's free and it would do me a huge favor. Thanks. Alright, so just like every other tier list video you watch, I'm going to need to give you guys a big, fat, flashing red warning that this is just based off my opinion, and I'm merely going to place them high or low based off my personal experiences and preferences. I have played every single one of these creatures, minus the one that just released a few weeks before I recorded this, but I have an episode here on YouTube of each and every one of these creatures, footage that I'll be using sporadically throughout the video, and if you're interested in watching the full review of each creature, links to the videos and playlists will be down below in the description. Now, I will take into account each creature's viability in the game's meta and how fun, useful, or unique their abilities and playstyles are in my ratings here, but first and foremost is how much they interest me personally. Alright, so with that intro out of the way, let's dive into the tier list and discuss all the good, bad, and ugly these creatures have to offer here in Path of Titans. So sit back, kick back, make sure you go grab a snack, because it's time to start the show. Let's start off simple and with the creature everybody knows and loves, the Stegosaurus. The Stego in this game is what I would consider a generic herbivore, and that's for good and bad. See, while the Stego doesn't really have anything bad about it, it's not outstanding in my eyes either. Obviously, playing this creature has its fun gameplay challenge of having most of its damage at the rear of your creature with those huge Thagomizer spikes at the end of its tail. You're definitely going to do a good bit of damage to your opponents when those hit. They also have a new pivot ability that you can utilize to spin in place, which honestly is kind of required for high combat efficiency, so make sure you get that ability. But it is a cool new ability I have yet to practice with personally. My experience with the Stego was a good time though. I made a character named Stego Steve, who ended up being the most depressed looking dinosaur I think I've ever seen. So I'm sorry, Steve, for not ranking you much higher. I'm sure it's not helping with your happiness. But I think a solid B tier is a good and honest place to start for this tier list. So Stegosaurus is here in the middle at B. Let's move on up to an A tier choice, and that is going to be the Daspletosaurus. I like this dude, and his large head 100% makes up for his tiny little arms for me. You see, in Path of Titans, most of the theropods you can play in this game are fun and have their own uniqueness amongst themselves. Daspleto, for me, is just the right amount of bulk, speed, and power to make it possibly my favorite theropod to play. More than just having a good, all-around balanced build, they specialize in having multiple head slots for their abilities. If you're new to Path of Titans, let me quickly explain that there are different slots of abilities each creature can upgrade and unlock to use in survival, movement, and combat. The pivot ability I mentioned earlier with the Stego is a good example of a unique ability that either only that creature can unlock, or it's one that only a few are available to grab. There are head slots, tail slots, metabolism slots, and front and back limb slots. The Daspleto here has 2 head slots available and can combine their normal bite with a sick, bone-breaking bite. The combination makes for an aggressive and fun theropod build that I just jive with, so Daspleto, I like you, man. You can have a high seat up here at A. Enjoy it. Alright, we have an A and a B tier creature to start us off. Let's grab one that's a bit lower. Down here in C, we have the Kentrosaurus. Now, I think the Kentro is actually a very unique option to play, and it's mainly down here in C because I personally don't have as much interest in playing one. If I was going to play a plated herbivore with a powerful tail, I'd rather play the Stego. The Kentro is basically a speedy and smaller version of the Stego, but it does have some really neat abilities that make it worth playing if you want that type of build. The coolest thing about the Kentro is their Death Rattle ability, which when used will increase its damage for the next 45 seconds. If used during a pivotal time in combat, it can really output a ton of damage that your aggressor might not be expecting. My Kentro was named Kentrosaurus Carl, and he's definitely a bit more happy-go-lucky kind of dinosaur compared to his buddy Stego Steve. So I do feel bad putting him down here at C, honestly. But hey, if I'm being honest, the Kentro just lacks a little bit of what I'm looking for in Path of Titans. Keeping with the discussion around herbivores, let's talk about an example of one I do really like, and that is the Iguanodon. My Iguanodon was named Mr. Chills, and he is quite the cool dude. Large and in charge, but with enough stamina to migrate the map with ease. I'm honestly a huge fan of these guys. Being large enough has the benefit of scaring off would-be attackers simply by being too much of a risk to attack, and that's always a nice feeling when you play a large herbivore. The Iguanodon also has the ability to unlock a charge, as well as a bleeding stab with its front limbs, which makes a pretty fun and versatile fighter in the game. Plus, you get to channel your inner Disney dinosaurs fan when playing them, and that's gotta be a plus too, right? So here sits Mr. Chills and all his Iguanodon buddies up at A tier, just behind Daspletosaurus. Alright, let's keep filling out this A tier, shall we? Let's talk Raptors. Path of Titans has two forms of Raptors we can play. The Deinocheirus and Latin Invenatrix. Both of these are going to sit between Daspletosaurus and Iguanodon, but I do like Deinocheirus a bit more, and I'll tell you why. See, both of these little guys are super fast, and running around them while being able to parkour your way across rocks, down trees, and the heads of herbivores. What makes doing so on the Deinocheirus a tad more interesting than the Latin is simply the unique ability called the speed buff that Deinocheirus gives. The Latin is a bit faster than Deinocheirus, but has far less stamina in the long run. And the speed buff that Deinocheirus can call out with will increase the running speed of all your party members within 30 yards for a full 40 seconds. It's quite a fun ability when used with playing with friends or even alone for a speed boost. And personally, the option to move as fast, if not faster, than the Latin when it wants to, makes the Deinocheirus just a hair more interesting for me personally. Plus, I like their feathers, so they're cool. A tier for both of them though. Solid picks, fun to play, easy to grow. Who doesn't like a good raptor, yeah? Alright, up next, the big bad of the game, Spinosaurus. Now, as I talk about the Spinosaurus, you're gonna start to notice a trend here that I dislike in Path of Titans. Now, I love whipping around and doing the parkour with the raptors and some other theropods that are capable of it, so that also means I'm gonna be much less interested in playing a slow and heavy, massive creature in the game. And well, Spino here is kind of the icon in that regard. They do have a lot of fun abilities though, like choosing the paddle upgrade in the tail slot that allows you to swim faster, as well as having more oxygen under the surface. And they also get a claw attack for the front limb slot, which is a nice alternative to biting that can do some serious damage to your opponent if they make the mistake of being in front of you. But most other playable creatures will simply keep their distance from you, so you'll rarely see combat outside of territorial disputes. Also, hot take, I just like the Jurassic Park look of Spinos, even though it's not nearly as fossil accurate as the one we have here in Path of Titans. And I know that might be a controversial take, but hey, that's just the truth. I don't like the look of the Spino as much as other Spinos out there in the media of the world, and that just makes it a tad bit less enjoyable to play. So yeah, all that combined, the big apex of Path of Titans lands at the current back end here of B, behind our Stego Steve. Oh, and if you're wondering, my Spino was called Sir Chomps-a-Lot. I like that one. Okay, so I was just talking about how you might notice a trend with me not liking slow-moving and large creatures in the game, right? Yeah, well, here we have another with the herbivore duck monster thing called Deinocheirus, aka Big Bird. Big Bird here is, more or less, exactly the same gameplay as the Spino, with the main difference being that this duck here likes its weed. Lake weed, of course. This vegetarian comes packing a punch just like the Spino does, and it's just as aquatic as well, which does make it more interesting overall compared to a lot of the things on the roster. As far as Big Bird's ability choices go, they're fairly common and generic choices, but you get to choose to build your duck in a more defensive, bulky build, or slim down its fat a bit and gain a bit more speed. So it's your call really, they're pretty versatile in that regard. But personally, the Deinocheirus is going to sit behind the Spino at the back end of B tier. B for Big Bird. Alright, let's grab our first S tier. Now, as many of you may already know, the character that I play the most in Path of Titans is my good friend, Speedy Boy, the Struthiomimus. The Struthi is the fastest thing in the game, and that alone makes it an absolute joy to run around with. pack that with a huge stamina bar and a jump that Stego Steve and Sir Chompsalot can only dream about, well, Speedy Boy here is an amazing creature to play. Now, there is some uniquely YouTubey reasons why the Struthi has moved its way into my heart when it comes to being a favorite playable, and that is because being the fastest and thus safest creature in the game has its major perks for me as a content creator. I'm able to hop on Speedy Boy here and cruise to anything I want to in the game. It allows me to test new features in the game, or find all the other players out in the world easily due to my travel time as being very short. And the Struthi has the odd ability to just walk up to carnivores. Seriously. Once you're fully grown, I feel like all carnivore players know that they can't really catch you, so they just kind of tolerate you. I've done quests side by side carnivores and grabbed quest objectives from right underneath their nose. It's a good bit of fun to mess with them. These herbivores have a ton of metabolism options to go with their jump kick combat abilities too that they have available. They can also eat bushes, but can spec into eating insects, which not many creatures can do in this game. They also have a forager option, which allows them to eat nuts and mushrooms, making the survival aspect of playing these guys even more unique and variable. So, while I know the Struthi might not be S tier for everybody, and I'm definitely not ranking them on combat efficiency, that's for sure. But for me, Speedy Boy and I have spent a lot of time together, and I'm proud and happy to declare it as my current main character in this MMO we call Path of Titans. Godspeed, Speedy Boy. Godspeed. Okay, if we just grabbed our first S tier dinosaur with the Struthi, let's talk about our only D tier choice now. And I know if this is your favorite creature in Path of Titans, you're really gonna be upset with me, but it's the Camptosaurus. And simply put, being the small herbivore that simply exists to run away isn't the most fun for me unless you are simply the fastest thing around like the Struthi is. Campto is just not as appealing to me either visually. I'm basically just simply not that excited to play the Campto, and its ability options are rather lackluster as well. They can spec into forager options like the Struthi can, but that's about the limit to its uniqueness and options. So, again, I'm sorry Campto fans, the Campto is just, I don't know, you know? It's just D tier. Worst choice to pick in this game in my opinion, so sorry, but alright, let's move on. Okay guys, let's bounce our way back up to B tier here. Let's look at two creatures at the same time this time, the Lambeosaurus and the newly released Barsboldia. So I have yet to play the Barsboldia, but I'm going to assume its experience is very similar to the Lambeo. Now, what makes these two very interesting in my opinion is that they are essentially the tank and the healer classes in this dinosaur MMO. The Lambeo has an ability called Healing Call, which does just that. It heals all party members within 30 meters for a full minute, which is pretty good. And the Barsboldia has a call named Rallying Call, which will increase defense to all party members. So while I personally have other creatures in this game that I'd rather play, I do really enjoy the idea that a large herbivore group of many different species can have their tank and healer players help out the Erd in times of need. That alone, I just find very unique about these two, and thus they're going to sit here in B tier, just in front of the Spino for Spino reasons, but just behind the Stego. And honestly, that's really just because I prefer the Stego aesthetically. All are good, solid choices in this game, so I'm giving them the B tier. How about we fill the S tier now with another legend, shall we? Let's talk about my favorite large herbivore in the game, and that's going to be the AO Triceratops. So like I mentioned with the Spino, I'm not the biggest fan of slow-moving creatures in this game. However, a better way to say that is I am generally more of a fan of the fast creatures. The AO Trike, however, makes being slow not feel so bad. Being an absolute tank of a creature has its benefits when you don't need to catch anything to eat. A problem I have with the Spino, for example. But when you're playing an herbivore that can defend itself from pretty much everything in the game, I don't really mind as much. The AO Trike also has a fun ability choice that makes it stand out amongst some other dinosaurs as well. Even though it's more of a defensive monster, it has an ability called Sharpened Horns that allows it to get a damage boost for a minute, as well as having a huge stomp ability. So you end up kind of feeling like you're playing a damage-focused creature, more than one focused on defense, like the before-mentioned Barsboldia. Also, the episode I made about my AO Trike, who I aptly named Tank, was also one of my favorite episodes. In it, I end up fighting a huge pack of carnivores amongst a herd of other AO Trikes. It was a pretty great time. So So I highly recommend checking out that episode if you're interested in AO Triceratops, showing off why it's the meanest herbivore around. So AO Triceratops easily gets S tier for me for my favorite giant herbivore to play, and I'm going to put him just behind Speedy Boy simply because Speedy's my boy, you know what I mean? Okay, so now let's talk about other Ceratopsians in this game. Sadly, I don't enjoy the Albertosaurus and the Stryacosaurus as much as I do the AO Triceratops. Also, try saying that sentence 5 times fast. Now, that mainly comes down to being a personal preference of Ceratops. See, I just like being the biggest and meanest one around if I am to play one. But that said, Alberto and Styra do have some uniqueness to their playstyle that you may enjoy more than I do. The Styra does have a stomp like the AO, and also comes with a back kick, which is wholly unique to itself. But personally, it just falls short of being fun to play when compared to the other trikes. Alberto, however, does have a bit more value to its playstyle in my opinion, which is actually a ton of fun. Alberto gets a head charge ability and a head slam, which is also a blast to try and combo into an aggressive carnivore player. Overall though, these smaller Ceratopsians are less interesting than the big tank of a creature that the AO is, so I'm just going to put Alberto here in B, just at the end, in front of the big bird. Styra, unfortunately, is going to be dropped down here to C, behind the Kentro. I definitely recommend Alberto here if you're debating between either of the two smaller trikes. Alright, it is finally time to talk about the two creatures that are arguably the most played creatures here in Path of Titans. The Metri and the Concavenator. Now I really enjoy both of these, and they're going to exist up here in A tier side by side with the Raptors. The Metri, which is also often, I think I could say, considered to be the strongest creature in the game, is pretty fun due to its speed being quite decently fast. Now they also come with a Venom Bite, allowing you to wear down your opponent over time, and this can allow you to bring down larger creatures than you really should be able to if you're skilled enough as a player. The Concavenator is less skilled of a fighter, but still decent in its own right. What makes Concave as deserving of a spot next to Metri is that its speed is relatively similar, and thus fun to whip around the map as, but it can also have semi-aquatic abilities that it can spec into, allowing it to swim faster and even learn how to dive. And as I said earlier, semi-aquatic creatures in Path of Titans are extremely fun, and I highly recommend them to a first-time player of Path of Titans simply because the game does water very well with fish, unique aquatic quests, and the water quality system, forcing players to migrate around the map. It's probably the most unique part that this game has over some of the other creature and dinosaur survival games that we have in the genre. But let me get back on track. I'm going to place Metri and Concave here, simply because of their combat prowess the Metri has. If you're looking for a good all-around fighter that you can spend time learning the ins and outs with to become a dominant contender out in Pangea, look no further than the Metri. But if you want something similar that can also swim, Concave has what you want. A tier for both of these theropods, and if you're wondering why Daspleto is higher than these two, well, I simply just like the creature more. And those two head slots make playing Daspleto feel fun and great. So yeah, my list, sorry. But I know many people would put Metri specifically up at S tier, and I don't blame you if you want to do that for your list. Okay, who to talk about next? Let's do the Anodontosaurus. And I like this little guy, but not a whole bunch. Just enough. Ano is interesting. It has an extremely super unique playstyle, being only slightly similar to something like the Stego and Kentro, while being way more defensive than both of those combined. I'm really glad that Ano is in the game, and love to have the species roaming around Pangea. But for me, they're just not exactly the playstyle that I am looking for, nor does the species wow me to become a personal favorite. So quick and kind of short entry here for this guy, but the Ano is going to hang out down here behind Spino and Alberto in the B tier. I like the defensive niche it brings to the game, but not as much as I'd like swimming as the Spino or charging as the Alberto. But a welcome addition to the game for sure, don't get me wrong. Alright, let's talk about a fan favorite theropod now, the Allosaurus. And I have chosen to drop him at the top of B tier. Now the Allo has, in my opinion, nothing special about it, aside from the fact it's a very solid, stable dinosaur in the game. and another one that I think is a really good starter choice for new players. Allo doesn't really have many unique abilities to choose from, but its stats and feel when you play it make playing this game kind of feel like the game's T-Rex. Getting an Allo to full adult will be quite rewarding, and if you can manage to find a few other Allo players to hunt with in a pack, then you're going to have a blast hunting around Pangea. But for me, the theropods up in A tier are just a bit more unique and thus interesting for me personally, more than the Allo is. So this is a very solid staple theropod that is a good average dinosaur to choose in this game. Top of B tier I think, and that's a very respectable place to hang out. Something that does not bring as much to the game for me as a theropod is, well, the Ceratosaurus. To be honest, I really liked Cerato, and he was actually the first theropod I ever played in the game, so I picked him for a reason. I just find that its niche to be a bit lackluster for me personally overall in the game. You see, the Cerato excels at hunting down those raptor players and other smaller creatures still growing up to adulthood. And it's not that it's lacking abilities, as it recently just got changes allowing it to have 2 head slots, including the bone break that I love so much with the Daspletosaurus. But it's just a bit slower than the Alioramus, who arguably performs the raptor and juvenile hunter niche a bit better in my opinion. Now I think this ranking is going to be a bit controversial for some, as the Cerato is not really bad in sense of balance in the game. It just has ended up being the least interesting theropod we have available for me, and thus I couldn't find myself to put it up at B tier with the Allo and Alio. So I'm sorry, Cerato. Genuinely, I like you as a species, but not as a playable here in Path of Titans. If we're going to get more smaller playable creatures, or even AI critters that end up being more of a feature in the game and kind of roam around, going forward, I can kind of see myself giving Cerato a second chance, but for now, you're getting the highest ranking as C possible, above Kentro and Styro. I'm sorry, bud. Alright, well, I kind of let this one's next ranking slip in that last discussion about Cerato, so we'll go over the Alioramus next. Alio is essentially, for me, a better Cerato as far as the niche they're going for in Path of Titans. The fast theropod that is a bit smaller than the rest of the pack. And well, like I mentioned with Cerato, it's a fun niche, but not the one I always want to play. I will admit, now that growth is a thing in the game, that these hunters could be a lot more fun than when I previously played them when everybody was a full adult. So the ranking on my tier list may be very different next time I sit down to make one of these. The Alioramus is actually a creature I have thoughts about doing a growth series similar to the Megalania and Argentinosaurus, which is a modded Ceratopod in the game. So not base roster and thus not in this tier list. But yeah, I think a growth series about the Alioramus could be really fun. So until then, it's just going to chill here in B tier as a very good option to choose. Okay, just 3 creatures left in our tier list, and I'm going to start by telling you now that I love all 3 of these, but one of them is going to sit here at the top of A tier, and that is the Suchomimus. The Sucho is just great. Not a lot of ability choices on this one, but I just like where it sits in the niche of creatures we have right now. It's large, but not the largest. It is slow, sadly, but it's not the slowest. And it's also a semi-aquatic, which I have already mentioned I think makes a creature in this game much more fun to play. The Sucho is a very interesting creature to play because the only thing you really need to worry about when near a body of water is a Spino, and, well, maybe a really good Sarco player. On land you can stand your own against basically everything in the game, and same goes for in the water. You always feel very powerful as this guy, and the larger stamina pool it has combined to Spino makes it stand out as the superior choice for me when choosing between the 2 semi-aquatic titans. The only real issue with the Sucho is how difficult it is to grow one, and the benefits of being large and capable really only apply to when it's fully grown. So if you want a challenging creature to grow, but one that will stand up to any test thrown its way at adulthood, I think the Sucho is a fantastic option to choose. Mine is a fierce lady named Misbehave, and mad respect to all of you who understand that old school reference. Alright, it's time for the last 2. And let me tell you right off the bat that these are both my number 1 and 2 slots for this tier list, easily both sitting high at the S tier spots. So let's discuss the two reptiles of Megalania and Sarcosuchus. Now, oddly enough, in a game full of dinosaurs, my favorite creatures to play are the two representatives from the reptile kingdom. Megalania being a fast and aggressive monitor lizard with a venomous spike, and the Sarcosuchus, an ancient alligator with an incredible bite force. These two have won me over for both their gameplay and the fact that, honestly, I just really like lizards. But let's discuss why specifically they have gained the top 2 slots on this tier list. Let's start with the Megalania. This monitor lizard is a blast. Like I keep saying throughout the video, I'm a big fan of the faster creatures that we have to choose in Path of Titans, and the Megalania is easily one of the fastest options we have. Pair that with the ability unlocks that allow you to spec into being subaquatic, and, well, you gain the awesome benefit of all those water quests and location to explore in the game. Simply just a great time. Now, you're not super fast in the water, and you definitely need to avoid all the other semi-aquatic creatures out there like the Spinosaurus and especially the Sarcos, but on land you're able to outrun all of those. And you can use the water to escape anything terrestrial that would want to take a bite out of you. The versatility alone makes this creature worthy of S tier in my opinion, and when you pair that with my simple love of monitor lizards, well, it's just an easy, obvious choice for me. Now, the Sarco is not nearly as capable on land, and that's totally okay, as the Sarco has a very unique playstyle compared to literally everything else in the game. It's super fast in the water, and can thus hunt down all other semi-aquatics who think they can get away with existing in the same body of water as it. And even a really skilled Sarco player can rival Spinos and Suchos for dominance in their chosen lake or river. For me personally, as well, the Sarco playstyle is pretty relaxing. I'll occasionally hop on my Sarco to grow him really slowly with no real rush to get to adult. And I do it as a means to kind of just relax, to take it slow, and to just enjoy the scenery that the lakes of this game have to offer. Trying to ward off smaller creatures that come up to take a drink of water is especially fun, and if you manage to catch somebody swimming across to, say, a quest on an island, oh boy, are they in for a rude awakening when you come up to chomp on their tail. So overall, Sarco is easily the most fun aquatic animal for me. It's relaxing, but it also has those challenges along the way, as being forced out of your lake by a larger Spino can cause some really enjoyable gameplay choices. Do you stay and fight for your lake, or bail to fresher waters? It's really a blast. Alright, so that leaves which one am I going to place higher, Megalania or Sarco? Well, if you have seen some of my videos of me playing my Megalania named Sandile, you'll already know that I have claimed it to be my all-time favorite playable in Path of Titans, so it will sit here as king of the playables for me personally. But Sarco is easily as enjoyable in its own unique playstyle kind of way. If I could play only one creature in this game, Megalania takes the cake for me, but if I was to only play a creature that is meant for the water, then the Sarco wins every day of the week in that regard. But ultimately, the reptiles of this game are far superior than the dinosaurs for me. Funny how that ended up being the case in this dinosaur creature survival game. Like I've mentioned a few times, I have a video on each and every one of these creatures in my Path of Titans playlist, which I have linked below, along with a link for all the specific videos if you're interested in taking a closer look at how these creatures play. I hope you're not too mad at some of my options, but I'm sure you will all let me know regardless down in the comment section below. Remember all, this is mainly a list based off my personal experience and enjoyment of the creatures, and not fully based off their combat prowess or efficiency. If you do want to stick around to see more videos like this, I do plan on continuing to make a tier list for all sorts of games and videos, and of course, we'll continue producing a ton of Path of Titans videos, so I welcome you all to subscribe to join the Sauropod squad if you're interested in more. I also have membership available now on this channel, so if you'd like to become a squad captain and gain access to all that entails, the join button is down below as well. I'd love to have you aboard the squad. But alright folks, that's everything from this video today. I hope you enjoyed watching it. I always have a fun time kind of sitting down and making these tier lists and kind of writing out my thoughts, so I hope you enjoyed the video along with that. But until next time, I have been Jay. This has been Jay72. I don't have a name for this guy, but I like him. He's cool. He's a great sauropod. But anyway, I'm going to let you get out of here. Until next time, peace.